Boom. Hello, everybody. Okay. Let's do it. Boom. Welcome to the thing. Sorry for the fucking about with the times and stuff. It's all good. Whatever. It's going to work anyway. I couldn't. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to politics and culture and some other shit. Tonight I'm going to be talking to you about Roger Casement. One of these guys, if you're Irish, you would definitely know his name. If you have an interest in Irish history, you definitely know his name. If you're obviously Casement Park in Belfast is named after him. But maybe you don't know the details. Oh shit, I was supposed to bring a book out and recommend it for you. Oh well. I just forgot. I'm all over the place. So, quick update on what I've been doing, basically. Well, first, let me just check actually that this is working. Before we push on. 'Cause I don't want. There we go. See, I can hear myself through the power of modern technology. Isn't it wonderful? So, a wee update on what I've been doing. So, I had a gig at the weekend. How fucking cool was that? With a gig in the Diamond Rock Club up there in a hall just outside Ballymena. And what a great time we had. It was brilliant. We really loved it. It was great to be back. It felt great to be back. It was mad. It was weird. Then muscle memory kicked in, but it was weird. And we did have a lot of fun, must admit. But there was a few moments there where you were kind of sort of going, okay, what the fuck's this? What's this feeling? What is this sensation that I am experiencing? But it was great. And what it kind of what's the word? What did it's shone a light for me personally, talking about myself personally. I'm speaking for me and Chris, is we kind of realised if we needed reminded, and bear in mind that it's the first gig we've had since New Year's Eve 2019-2020, because that was our last show, and then we had a couple of months break, and then we were due to go on a UK tour, and we never got to go on the tour. The first lockdown kicked in. So this was our first gig in 18 months, something like that, maybe more. And what it helped us to realise was how much flavour and seasoning and in the mosaic of our lives there was, without the gig, there was a big bit in the middle there just missing. And we'd gotten used to it. But I imagine it's like sort of missing a limb type of a thing, that you get used to it but you know it's not there, and it was like that. And then having the gig again just brought it into stark relief. Just boom, there you go. This is what you haven't had. And it was great. Quite emotional now thinking about it actually. And everybody was adorable and helpful and lovely and kind. And relieved as well. There were people, this is the best gig I've ever... And it wasn't the best gig they've ever seen, but they were so sweet about it. And, yeah, so that was that. So just on the gig thing, while we're talking about it, just let you know a couple of things. We've got gigs coming up. So, we've a couple... Just get these in order. Stendhal Festival. So we're playing Stendhal Festival on the 14th of August. Okay, so that's next week, next Saturday, and we're looking forward to that. All socially distanced, I believe. They've a capacity up there at Lammy for many thousands, a few thousands, but I think the 500 tickets. So I think there's tickets available. I'm not sure. So go on to the Stendhal Festival website. You Google that or find them on Facebook or whatever it is. And then the next gig we have after that is very quickly. I'll show you the poster here on the screen. In the Atlantic Bar in Portrush. Now, I don't know why only my feet have made the poster, but it's okay. my fragile ego can handle it. And we're playing with the Saberjets, as you can see on the screen there. So it's the Bonnevilles and the Saberjets playing in the Atlantic in Portrush on the 28th of this month. So that's coming up soon as well. So it's 2 or 3 weeks away. And the great people up in the Atlantic have put us on. And anybody that's familiar with the gig scene here in the north will know the bar and know Stephen up at the Atlantic and all the good folk up there. And we do well up there. People come out for us. And we're really looking forward to it. And we're playing with the Saberjets. Legends, of course. So, and that's always a treat. So the next gig we have after that, I've just got my dates written down. I'm actually organised for this one, for this bit. not in general. The next gig we have after that is the Cathedral Quarter Arts Festival in Belfast. And I believe that we're playing with our Scottish friend Dave Arcari. So I don't know if that's been announced yet, but I think it was sort of dropped and then it wasn't. But fuck it, I'm telling you now, go and get tickets. So that's on the 3rd of September, and then on the 4th of September, 2 days in a row, we're playing a gig in Derry in the Yellow Yard on the 4th. And I can't wait for both of those. It's going to be a gig back to back. And you wouldn't believe how physically demanding gigging is. It's really, really, you feel it the next day. You really do. You know you've been in a fight. But you get match fit, to use a football expression. But you get match fit, right? And that's fine. So then you're able to go on tour, which is why you're able to do it for 10 nights or 14 nights or 20 nights in a row. Your voice gets used to it, these muscles get strong and your body gets strong, and it's tiring, of course, but you get used to it, same as you get used to anything else. Well, we played the gig on Saturday night, and I can tell you, I was still feeling it during the week. Up until yesterday, I don't think my voice was still croaky. But so this is going to be 2 in a row, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing how my body isn't used to doing 2 days in a row, because I haven't done it in 18 months. But I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the gigs anyway, because I want to play the gigs, you know that. But it's just a be personal thing for me. So what else? And we have so big announcement during the week. The boys are playing the Limelight on the 2nd. You see it on the screen there, on the 2nd of December. Doors at 6:30. £10 tickets available on Eventbrite. So we want you to go and buy your tickets and sell that out for us. I don't know what the situation is with ticket numbers, with social distancing. I really don't. It'll all be explained there. We love playing the Limelight. It's one of our favourite venues in the world. We all grew up going to see all the bands that we saw, and we saw them in the Limelight, and then we get to play in the Limelight, and it just fills us full of joy because it's one of the best places ever, and we love it. So go and see that, and there's going to be support as well. We're currently working on that. So that's quite a few. Although, well, it's quite a few if you compare it to the past 18 months. It's not. It's only half a dozen gigs. Normally we've dozens of gigs looking, in that sort of a thing, but we'll take it. So there's that. Would really appreciate it if you go and buy the tickets to that Limelight gig, or if you're in Portrush or Derry or Limavady in the coming weeks, you should come and see us. It'd be great to see you. So, just this last little announcement here. So the Northern Ireland Music Prize. So you know I released my solo album last year. So you have the Northern Ireland Music Prize, which is our regional Grammys. And it is. That's what it is. And so I've been nominated. Well, no, I'm sorry. The Northern Ireland Music Prize. So there's an eligible list. So they gather up all the information of all the artists and albums that are eligible for and you have to fit certain criteria. So your album has to go out on a record label and has to have so many copies and blah blah blah. I'm not sure what the criteria is, but my solo album Northern Gothic is eligible to be considered for the music prize. Now I do not think for 1 second that my album is going to be shortlisted. I really don't. I'm not going to lie to you. I would love for it to be shortlisted, but I don't think it's going to be, because I think it's a wee bit sort of like all these prizes, all these things, and that's the industry. It's the music industry. It's the way it is. You have to be involved at certain levels. And me and Chris don't do this. We're just giggers. We just gig. We just play rock and roll music and write songs and tour and bring joy and happiness to the masses. You kind of have to have management and record labels out there sort of advocating for you and doing things for you. And we don't do that. And I don't do that. So I don't expect the album to be shortlisted. But I'm not going to lie. If it was, it would be over the moon. We've had two Bonneville's albums shortlisted in the past, Folk Art and Arrow Pierce My Heart, and we were over the moon. We were fucking delighted. We went to the ceremony. Kieran Lavery won it 1 year, and shit, I can't remember his name. Sorry, excuse me. Foy Vance won it the other year, and fair play to them. And we went and we drunk and we took full advantage of the hospitality and had a great time. Loved it. I make no apologies for it. And if we got the trophy and we got the money, we would be as proud as punch. And if I got shortlisted, I would be as proud as punch. Not going to be. Don't expect to be. But happy to be eligible. Being on the eligible list is not really much of an achievement. It's just you're eligible to be considered. So, but nonetheless, it's in there, and I'm going to take it. And there you go. And we'll say no more about that. So, what else have I got here? I've got a list. Let me see. Upcoming dates. Music prize mentioned. Oh. Yes, the movie premiere. So last night, we went to...
Some things are older than science.
Premiere for...
Older than God. The earth has its own secrets. And if you get close enough, you'll hear it.
And there it is. And we went to Belfast. And we went...
Haven't you guys got anything better to do?
Nope. No, we don't.
This land belonged to Abertag. He drained people's blood and drink it like water.
Like Dracula.
Fuck Dracula.
I'd love to know if there's actually anything under there.
We'll find out soon enough.
So, I talked to you, that was what it was like. Remember last week's episode we were talking about?
I saw something weird.
Whose foot's that?
Fuck this, I'm out!
Remember?
There's a vampire on my side!
And then I mentioned,
Fucker tried to bite
we
me.
were talking about that, and then I told you about this movie.
This isn't Dracula. People don't get turned from a fucking bite. They get turned by the stones from Abertach's grave.
From the boys from Cornwall. So the very next day, we get an email inviting us to the premiere.
We need better weapons. Are there any ideas in there?
Fuck me.
What about
I'm
sunlight?
not, as I said,
I mean,
I'm
that
not
is
saying
the
it was
number one
furries,
vampire
but it was
killer.
furries. And it was brilliant. So me and Janie,
If Abertach binges all night, the whole town's gonna be dead as fuck.
photograph and
Moved to the wrong fucking town.
we saw the movie in. We saw the movie in the cinema. I just realised that the audio was on there. So we saw the movie in the cinema. And it was great to see it in the cinema, in its natural environment. And we loved it. We just absolutely loved it. So I think I'll just repeat that in case you never heard, because the movie was on there. So last week I was talking about Abertach and the Irish vampires, and I mentioned that we had a song in this film. We get the credit drop right at the end, so right when the credits go, then the song kicks in. Very cool, very groovy. And so we're talking about that, and then the very next day we have an invite in the inbox. It was just, it was brilliant. We loved it, absolutely loved it. So we went up last night, and Chris, so there's a picture on the screen. There's me and Janie. Janie looking absolutely breathtaking in her beautiful dress. I'm a very lucky man. She's a very beautiful woman, a beautiful person too. I must add. And I must say, I'm not looking too shabby myself in my suit. And we went up, and Chris turned up basically wearing a pair of dad shorts and a Metallica t-shirt. So he didn't get any pictures taken because he was a fucking holy show. I'm only joking. He didn't look too bad. He didn't look as good as us. But he says he didn't. He says he didn't know. He fucking did, because I told him. I sent him a WhatsApp message. I said, me and Jeannie are going full glam, mate. You might want to get involved in that. But he didn't. So, right. Oh, there it is. So there's the cinema, and there's the screen before the movie starts. I didn't want to take any footage of the movie on. I didn't want to sort of do that. So, I think we're near done with all the updates. Yeah, so loads of stuff. Oh, and I'm playing football on Sunday in Knockrammer Park in Lurgan. I'm going to play my football debut. First game of football in a fucking literally half a lifetime. The last competitive game of football I played was when I was a builder's labourer in the Isle of Man 25 years ago. No joke. I played for a team called Douglas Royals, and I got sent off on my debut for telling the referee to go fuck himself. The referee was well within his rights. So, right, so, where are we? Let's do this. Dump. We're going to talk about... Well, the big thing we're going to talk about is Roger Casement, because it was the anniversary of his death. He was executed the 2nd of August, 1916. And we all know who Roger Casement is, but I might tell you a few things about him that you didn't know. And then we're going to talk about... So I'm going to finish on that. So we're going to hit a few things real quick here. Before we get to the mighty Roger. Yeah, I'm just getting my things all lined up here, making sure I've got everything I need. Right, so one of the first things I want to talk about is this. I meant to mention this the past couple of weeks. Was it last week maybe? But I never got to it. And it's about Arlene Foster. Again, the ex-leader of the DUP. Obviously you know who she is. I don't need to explain anything. But since she's been ousted, she's now found a new day job, being working alongside other lovely people such as Nigel Farage on the fledgling GB News. What is GB News? GB News is basically it's the British version of what they're trying to do, a Fox News version in England, in Britain. And it's been Andrew Neil, ex-BBC, and it got off that terrible start. So the ratings were poor. In fact, the ratings were so bad at some times that it was impossible to measure them. They were so small, so they assumed that they had zero. It's assumed then they have zero viewers. That said, they quickly they hit the reset button. They got rid of all the commentators and personalities, and were most of them that they were relying upon, and pulled in new ones. And the new ones, two of the new ones that they reached out to was Nigel Farage and Arlene Foster. Now, I can see Nigel Farage bringing in a certain viewership, be it through gawkishness, curiosity, or people genuinely agreeing with him, because there are enough of those, especially in England. But Arlene Foster, for the life of me, I can't see what on earth the average GB News viewer is going to get from listening to her. And as a couple of people pointed out on Twitter especially, GB News is so not giving a shit about Northern Ireland that they didn't even put Northern Ireland. It's not even GB on Northern Ireland, because, as you know, Northern Ireland isn't in Great Britain, it's in the United Kingdom. It's Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It's a United Kingdom with Northern Ireland in it. If it was to include Northern Ireland, it would be called UK News. So, but this is one of the many contradictions that unionism and loyalism constantly befuddle us with. So, and the truth of the matter is, the average... Right, I'm going to read this article. So I have an article here by Tom Collins. I think this was from the Irish Times. I'm not 100% sure. I don't even know who Tom Collins is, but it's a good article. So, the union... I'll throw the picture up there so that you can see. There it is there. The union is a sham, and it's time to face the truth. Right. Did I watch Arlene Foster's debut as a commentator on GB News? Did I? Hell. Life's too short, and I have no intention of doubling the channel's viewing figures. Mrs. Foster has every right to a life beyond the Northern Ireland Assembly, but if she is hoping to reinvigorate herself, GB News is not the place for her. It's the last refuge of the damned, a television channel populated by the undead of TV journalism and right-wing politics. You would have thought Mrs. Foster, the unionist leader whose ham-fisted approach to Brexit placed a border down the middle of the Irish Sea, would have learned her lesson, but no. There she was, pontificating alongside Brexit begetter Nigel Farage on a TV channel whose very name betrays the fact that English right-wingers do not consider Northern Ireland to be a fully paid-up member of their sovereign nation. There's a reason the country is called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The 6 counties of the ancient province of Ulster is an embarrassing appendage, and there is a reason why GB News puts and Northern Ireland to one side. It's irrelevant to its agenda. And that's it in a fucking nutshell. It is irrelevant to their agenda. Their ERG hard right agenda. We all know the English would rather have Brexit than Northern Ireland. Countless opinion polls have demonstrated that. One of the funny things about modern politics is that many members of the so-called Conservative and Unionist Party don't much care for the union at all. In their hearts, of course, the likes of Mrs. Foster know that they are not wanted. which makes their neediness all the more surprising. Someday the penny will drop, but good heavens, they are slow learners. Pretty well every Prime Minister since Wilson has betrayed them. Before him, Northern Ireland was not even listed among any other business in Westminster's agenda. And yet Unionists continue to suck up to London in the forlorn hope that it will repay their sacrifice on the Somme, the shipyard's contribution to the Second World War, and the gift of George Best to English football. Back in the 80s, when I was a journalism student, we were given a talk by Lewis Hearn, then deputy editor of the Times. Hearn was a fabled foreign correspondent and said to be the model for Thomas Fowler, the protagonist in Graham Greene's The Quiet American. Northern Ireland was in the thick of the Troubles, having just come through the hunger strikes. What would you recommend, one of my peers asked Hearn, if someone came to you and said they wanted to train to be a foreign correspondent? And without pausing for breath, Hearn said, I'd send them to Northern Ireland. It's a foreign country anyway. So much for it being as British as Finchley. Such was the power of his words and the vehemence in which he said them that they have made an impression which has never left me. He voiced what the British establishment thought then, what it has always thought, and what it thinks today. Just reflect on Dominic Cummings' recent admission that Northern Ireland was far from being a priority for the Leave campaign. Ireland would have been a bit messy, but so what? It's a small problem relative to others. That's what he said. He's quoting Cummings there. Just dwell for a moment on that dismissive phrase, so what? Even better, every unionist should think long and hard about it. So what about the victims of the Troubles? So what about the Edgar Grahams and the Norman Stronges? So what about the Mountbattens? So what about the terror in unionist and nationalist areas? So what about the peace process that brought the killings to an end? So what indeed? The protocol, Cummings confesses, was signed for short-term political expediency. He told the BBC it punted different questions into the future. From Britain's point of view, he said to Laura Kuenssberg last week, a deal at the border down the Irish Sea was the right thing to do. The insight makes all the more shocking the failure of unionism to wake up and smell the Ulster fry. Their future and the future of their people is best placed by opening a genuine dialogue with their fellow inhabitants of this shared island, rather than hoping against hope that England will do the right thing by them. As for Mrs. Foster's television career, she'd have more viewers and be of more use with a slot on the shopping channel selling Cookstown sausages, Coleraine cheddar and Fermanagh black bacon. There you go. And he's not wrong. This continued dependence and pathetic, I have to say, pathetic hope that the English are going to do the right thing by 100 years after, and it goes on beyond 100 years. I'm going to read you something about Roger Casement shortly, and you're going to understand that this has been going on for a lot longer than 100 years. But the continued betrayal is just, and the continued reaching is just staggering. It is literally breathtaking. I don't get it. Excuse me, take a little drink there. I just don't get it. I understand if that's what you want. If you want to be a part of the union, you need to make yourself an integral part. When Northern Ireland, or the 6 counties or whatever, was considered to be vital, whenever people were making blustering speeches about Northern Ireland in Westminster with an English accent, they were getting something out of it. We here were providing something, be it men or soldiers, or as the man says in the article, ships from the shipyards or whatever. We're providing not, and we're providing not. We haven't for a very long time, and we're not wanted. And we need to have a bit more dignity. So there you go. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk to you about. Tom Collins' article. There you go. Now, this next thing. Yeah. Oh no, I'll keep it Northern Ireland, because this is fucking brilliant. So, you can see on the headline there, this is from the Belfast Telegraph. The Brexit protocol protest. Can you remember Jim Allister and Kate Hoey? And was it Ben Habib? I can't remember if he was there, but you see the photograph there on the screen. There's Jamie Bryson, the Donaghadee barrister, Iron Spade, as I like to call him, on a platform with people with Union Jack fetishes behind them. Can you remember those protests from a few weeks ago? Months, can't remember. Well, the police have now urged Jim Allister and Kate Hoey to hand themselves over for questioning. So, quick paragraph. Dozens of people in Belfast, Newton Ards Banker and Ballymena have been written to by the police and offered the opportunity to take part in a voluntary interview. Now, they're not being arrested or anything like that, so get that clear from the start, about their attendance at illegal gatherings, and because the gatherings were illegal. You think that with all the legal brains on the stage there, that they would have known not to take part in these things. But they did. The police want to talk to them, and now they're complaining about being victimised by the cops. Two-tier policing is alive and well as the NSI sets about with vigour the investigation of a wholly peaceful anti-protocol. It doesn't matter that it was wholly peaceful. It was illegal. You think being a barrister there, and with the genius that is Jamie Bryson sitting beside him, they would have known that. But they speak with forked tongue. They know full well what they're doing. So I just thought that was funny. I wanted to share that with you. So here's a quick one as well. Now, my friend Pete, there he is. Hey, Pete. All right, buddy. I did start early. Sorry, mucker. I started early because I might have somewhere to run off to, so that's why I started early. So, and I was sitting in the house and I was a bit bored, to be honest. So I wanted to come out and do this. So you've arrived just in the nick of time. So my mate Pete sent me this. He phoned me yesterday and told me about, was I aware that some protesters at a Kill the Bill, well, it was a protest that did descend into a riot. And was I aware that they've been jailed? And there's a few of them have been jailed. So, what were they protesting? They're protesting the police and crimes bill. So let me just, I don't know if you can hear that, but somebody's actually chainsawing a tree outside my studio. Great timing, you fucking dick. Right, so I'll carry on anyway. So let me see if I can find. So David Lammy, who is a Labour MP, I found this video of him explaining the problem and what he's going to explain. Basically, what the police and crimes bill is going to do is make crimes out of protesting, essentially. So if you cause a disturbance, they can arrest you. Well, that's the point of a protest. So we'll let David Lammy do the talking. So check this out.
Madam Deputy Speaker, instead of tackling violence against women, the government has prioritised giving the police the power to prohibit the fundamental freedoms of protest that the British public hold dear. And by giving the police this discretion to use these powers some of the time, it takes away our freedom all of the time. The government's bill targets protesters causing too much noise and says that those who cause annoyance could be jailed for up to 10 years. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm thankful that the draconian limits on the power to protest were not in place during the great protests of the 20th century that led to real change. When the suffragettes marched for the right to vote, some of them were prepared to break the law to make their point just outside the House of Commons? Does the Secretary of State believe that those women who shouted noisily should have been arrested too? Protesters marched from Jarrow in Tyneside all the way to London to demand the right to work in 1936. Does the Secretary of State think the police should have had the power to stop them before they even passed York? The anti-apartheid movement, of which I was part, marched continuously on Trafalgar Square for black and white people to be treated as equal. Does the Secretary of State seriously believe that they should have been arrested because they caused an annoyance? Throughout Britain's history, protest has been a fundamental method for the public to voice dissent. Pandemic aside, what about society has changed exactly? That means the police need more powers to control protests today than they did yesterday. And what about the images of police tackling a mourning woman to the floor last weekend makes him think the police do not have enough as it stands? The truth, as has been briefed to his favourite newspapers, is that it is introducing these measures because it dislikes Black Lives Matter, because it hates Extinction Rebellion, because both tell too many hard truths. The Conservative Party's principles are rooted in liberty and against the overreach of the state. I call on every member of the governing party who still believes in freedom to join with the opposition and vote against this bill tonight. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's not only those who cause annoyance that the government thinks should be locked up for a decade. It's also those who damage statues of slave owners. Madam Deputy Speaker, unlike the government, the opposition will never condone criminal behaviour, but this government's priorities are backwards, they're upside down. Unlike women, memorials are mentioned in this bill 8 times. The government thinks people who damage statues should spend up to 10 years in prison because of their emotional value, but it's fine with 5-year sentences for rape. This is not a hypothetical. Anthony Williams strangled his wife to death, but only received a 5-year sentence. John Patrick raped a 13-year-old girl, but only got 7 years in jail. Fernando Orlando and Lorenzo Constanzo were jailed for 7.5 years for raping a woman in a Soho nightclub. James Reeve raped a 7-year-old disabled girl, but only got 9 years. And David Nicholson raped an 11-year-old, but was given a sentence of 9 years and 4 months. What does this bill do to address those injustices that many people feel? The government would rather blow a dog whistle against minorities than make women safe. Measures in the bill will further compound the inequalities experienced by gypsies and travellers, who are already the most disproportionately represented group in the justice system. Those found guilty of trespass in this bill could receive a higher sentence than someone convicted of stalking. Once again, this government's priorities are skewed. Police forces do not even support the government's criminalisation of trespass. The National Chief Police Council and the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners said trespass is a civil offence, and our view is that it should remain so. Why is this government determined to lock up gypsies and travellers, even against its own police's advice? Madam Deputy Speaker, many of the other measures in this bill will compound the biases he knows exist in the justice system. But Labour cannot vote for a police and crime sentencing and courts bill that ignores the intimidation, violence and abuse women face. We cannot vote for this bill when it fails to increase sentencing for rape and stalking. We cannot vote for this bill when it fails to criminalise street harassment. We cannot vote for this bill when it fails to make misogyny a hate crime. We cannot vote for this bill when it fails to give whole life orders to those found guilty of abduction, serious assault and murder of a stranger on his watch. And we cannot vote for a bill when it fails to outline a strategy to tackle the culture of misogyny that underpins it. We cannot vote for this bill
So there we go. That's David Lammy explaining what the Police and Crimes Bill is. Now, these protesters, there was a protest in Bristol against the Police and Crimes Bill. There should have been protests all over the place. Well, there was, but the Bristolians went at it, and unfortunately, there was, the article here says, 3 men, 2 women. This was the other day. The youngest of 18 were sentenced to more than 3 years for acts of rioting and outraging public decency during the March protests. There was a violent, it 2 cops had broken bones and police vehicles were set on fire. So they were arrested and sentenced for that. Initially, both Pete and I, well, Pete was telling me, but we both thought it was because of the Police and Crimes Bill that they were able to be jailed. It wasn't that. But that's not to underplay how serious this is. And it is serious. And as David Lammy points out there, the police don't want a lot of the powers that are going to be given to them. And the point of this, the point that the government think that this is necessary right now, that's the point. And why do they think it's necessary right now? It's because of what they're doing and maybe what they're planning to do. So David Lammy mentioned there about Extinction Rebellion and the BLM protests. Now, doesn't matter what you think about them, I personally support them fully, but the Extinction Rebellion people, for example, they're shutting down streets and they're not asking for permission. Well, now that's going to be criminalised. These people are going to be jailed for that under this new law. And again, you can say, if it's an inconvenience, you can say, well, it's an inconvenience and they're rude or they're over the top, or I disagree with them. It's not the point. The point, well, I agree with them personally myself. I agree. When it comes to the climate, we're beyond the talk. We're beyond having conversations. No one's doing anything. So this was going to happen, that a group like Extinction Rebellion would come into existence, shouldn't surprise anybody. And the same for BLM. And if you consider the difference between what's legal and what's right, one time slavery was legal, and one time women not having the vote was legal, but we had the suffragettes and we had the abolitionist movement with regards, and both of those protest movements did illegal things. They made the establishment uncomfortable by focusing on the issue and colouring in outside the lines to get their fucking point across. Now that's going to be, now that they're criminalising that with heavy jail sentences, we're talking 4, 5, 10 years for certain things, which today, these things aren't illegal. But this time next year, you might go to jail for 10 years for them. It's no good. Obviously this is very dangerous. Now, this bill is going through its second reading in the House of Lords, I believe. And it's very worrying. It's very, 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 very dangerous. As a person that goes on protests myself, I do go on protests when I can, when I'm so motivated to do so. I don't want to be getting jailed because I'm going to go and trying to make a point about something. But anyway, so just letting you know about it. Keep an eye on it. We'll get there. We'll get there with this one. Right, so to the main point of this podcast. Roger Casement. Who was Roger Casement? I'm about to tell you. So anybody in Ireland knows who Roger Casement is. So Roger Casement is a quick read from his Wikipedia. Sir Roger Casement, as he was known up until he got executed, but he actually had that taken that knighthood taken from him before they hung him. Ruaidh Daithí Mac Eastman in Irish. He was a diplomat, a British diplomat. So he worked for the British Foreign Office as a diplomat. Born in Dublin. Father, an English father and an Irish mother. And he's considered the father of 20th century human rights investigations. So I'll get to what it was he actually got hung for. But he was the guy that went to the Congo and then told the world what King Leopold of Belgium was doing in the Congo. And my God, if you don't know who King Leopold of Belgium was doing in the Congo, and I'll tell you, he would basically treat... Oh, right, I'm going to read a bit here from the... I'll read a little bit from his Wikipedia, real quick. Casement worked in the Congo for Henry Morton Stanley and the African International Association from 1884. This association became known as a front for King Leopold of Belgium, the second of Belgium, in his takeover of what became the so-called Congo Free State. Casement worked on the survey to improve communications and recruited supervisors. I want to get to the bit. He met Joseph Conrad, who wrote in Heart of Darkness, which became the film Apocalypse Now. So that's what this is. So Apocalypse Now is set in Vietnam, isn't it? The film, well, the book from which it's taken, Heart of Darkness, is set in the Belgian Congo, and it's basically the Kurtz character in the movie is the king, and how he has become. So let me just explain it here. Casement I just did see a great sentence which explain. This is it. So Joseph Conrad and Casement were both inspired by the idea that European colonialisation would bring moral and social progress to the continent and free its inhabitants from slavery, paganism and other barbarities. Each would soon learn the gravity of his error. Conrad published his short novel Heart of Darkness in 1899, exploring colonial ills. Casement later exposed the conditions he found in the Congo during an official investigation for the British government. In these formative years, he also met Herbert Ward and they became longtime friends. So, what they were doing, they were... King Leopold was using the Congo as his own personal fiefdom. Like, so he owned the Congo. That was the... It wasn't a colonial outpost, or it wasn't officially colonized by Belgium. It was officially owned by the king himself, though he did use Belgium's resources, army, etc. to do that. But any wealth extracted went straight to him. And this man was cruel beyond compare. This, I don't know. I mean, we're talking Hitler levels of cruelty, of madness, cruelty and psychoticness. One of the things that he did was the the four men, they were allowed to kill the natives who were one of the things that they were extracting from the Congo was rubber. So the rubber from those trees, and that was going to Europe to make things like car tires and bicycle tires, and rubber, which was a new product in Europe. So Congo was rich in that, so it was very helpful, very useful for them. But the four men were allowed, the natives were slaves, basically, enslaved, and they were allowed to kill them for anything, and they did in massive numbers. But if you were allowed to use one bullet to kill one person, and the way that you'd prove that you'd killed the person was you'd cut off their right hand, and then that would go to another fund. They would count, and if there was 20 bullets missing used, there had to be 20 right hands in the basket. And if you used a bullet and didn't kill someone, missed, say, you were allowed to then go and just take someone's right hand and put it into the basket. It didn't matter. And as a consequence, baskets of limbs became common sight in the areas, and the population of some parts of the country were reduced by 90%. It was just, they killed millions of people, 20 million people or something. I think that's the number, 20 million. It was a staggering cruelty. But Casement went there and told the world about it. But he went out there with as most colonialists did. Remember whenever we were talking weeks ago about going out to India, and like it was 200,000 English or 200,000 British, and they managed to control a population of 300 million or something. But these people went out, and they thought they did think that a lot of them thought that they believed the propaganda. So this idea that you're lesser, and as an Irish person, I would have been one of those lesser. I would be considered subhuman to them. So, I'll just read a little bit more. So, Casement went out, and he travelled for weeks in the Upper Congo Basin and interviewed people throughout the region, including workers, overseers, mercenaries. He delivered a long, detailed eyewitness report to the Crown that exposed abuses, the enslavement, mutilation, torture of natives on the rubber plantations. There we go. It became known as the Casement Report in 1904. King Leopold held the Congo Free State since 1885. And then the world was outraged, and the Berlin Conference of European powers in the United States effectively gave him free rein in the area. Then Belgium ended up buying it from him, and it became the Congo. Then the Belgian Congo. That's when it became the Belgian Congo. And then Casement comes back to Ireland, starts to change his opinion about colonialism and Britain's role in it, but he's still working for the government, and he goes out to Peru. And out in Peru, in the Amazon basin, the British company called the Peruvian Amazon Company, which had been registered in Britain in 1908, and had a British board of directors, were doing something similar. Maybe not just as bad, but or maybe it's just not to the same scale, but it was as bad. And they would kill people, and and they're just extracting wealth. And that's what colonialism is. That's what the empire is. All empires. Africa isn't poor. Rich countries don't go to poor countries to help them. Anywhere an empire ever arrived, anywhere a colonialist ever arrived, was to extract wealth, not because they were poor, for the opposite reason, because they were rich. all the countries were rich. All the African countries, India controlled, before the British got there, 20% of world trade. India. Within 200 years later, it's a fraction of a percent. Right? What was the... And that, so that's where we're... So, I am being terribly distracted by someone with a fucking chainsaw right out of my window. It's driving me nuts. So, Casement comes home and he basically joins the Irish League, the Gaelic League. And he was a big proponent of the use of Irish language and all this sort of stuff. He joined Sinn Féin, as it was back then. And he started to advocate for a united Ireland. So, Casement retired from the British Consular Service in 1913. In November of that year, he was among those who helped form the Irish Volunteers, which was a response to the formation of the Ulster Volunteers, the UVF, in what it was then still Ireland. It was just the north of Ireland. Casement goes to America to get money in order to provide arms for the volunteers, and he gets a good amount of money. Let me just... So he ends up trying to buy... World War I happens. He ends up trying to buy arms from the Germans. I won't go into all the detail. It goes on. It's quite a bit. He's out in Germany for quite a while. He ends up understanding that he's trying to get the Germans to help the Irish to beat the English in Ireland. They don't go for it. He ends up getting a ship full of guns, and he gets brought back to Ireland with an accompanying U-boat, or maybe he's on the ship. I can't remember. And he comes ashore in what's called it's called Queenstown in Cork, which is now Cove, isn't it? We don't call it Queenstown anymore. We call it Cove. He has an outbreak of malaria, which he initially got when he was out in the tropics, and it comes back to him, and he ends up with his compatriots end up leaving him on shore in Cove, in just outside in a town called Tralee, and the local constabulary pick him up and arrest him. He then, the ship is scuttled with all the guns on it and the munitions, of which there weren't much use. They weren't really what he had expected or what he was promised. He tried to get the Easter Rebellion. Sorry, skipping ahead here, right? We're now up to like 1916. So the Easter Rising. He tried to get the Easter Rising cancelled, and he tried to get a message to the leaders of the Easter Rising, because he knew it was going to be a bloodbath. And the person that was in charge of overseeing Casement refused to pass the message on, because he knew that the leaders were going to be the rebels were going to be massacred. And he said something along the lines of, "It's best to lance a boil, and let it, whatever." So it turned out to be. And as we all know, famously, the Easter Rising was massacre, more or less. The rebels held out admirably for as long as they could, and the leaders of the massacre were eventually captured and executed. The 14 of them, weren't they? At that point, Casement is taken to England for trial, and he is a high-profile celebrity, right? And lots of high-profile celebrities at the time were advocating for him, including Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of the Sherlock Holmes books, of which I was a huge fan when I was a child. And he was taken to, I'm just scanning here, Brixton Prison. And he was charged with treason, sabotage and espionage against the crown. Now, this is the point. Casement made a speech in the dock, and it is considered to be one of the greatest speeches ever. And former British Tory Chancellor Norman Lamont, it's his choice of greatest speech of all time, and Norman Lamont would know because he's one of these sort of British parliamentarian figures that knows the history. He's a company man through and through. So, and he was Casement was charged with treason against the crown. Now, Casement's argument, he can't be charged with treason against the crown because he's not English. Right? So I'm going to read you a bit of the speech. Not all of it, because it is long. But I have a few little paragraphs here that I'm going to read from Casement's speech. Now, as we know, he was found guilty, and there was an appeal which he lost, and eventually he was hung. Sorry, I said the 2nd of August. It's the 3rd of August, 1916. So let me just get a drink here. So here we go. My Lord Chief Justice, as I wish my words to reach a much wider audience than I see before me here, I intend to read all that I propose to say. What I shall read now is something I wrote more than 20 days ago. I may say at once that I protest against the jurisdiction of this court in my case on this charge, and the argument that I am now going to read is addressed not to this court, but to my own countrymen. There is an objection, possibly not good in law, but surely good on moral grounds, against the application to me here of this old English statute, 565 years old, that seeks to deprive an Irishman today of life and honour for not adhering to the king's enemies, but for adhering to his own people. So the law that they were charging him under was 565 years old. Edward off the top of my head, I could be wrong about this, Edward VII. So this law that hung him was 565 years old in 1916. Right? So when this statute was passed in 1351, what was the state of men's minds on the question of a far higher allegiance? That of a man to God and his kingdom. The law of the day did not permit a man to forsake his church or deny his God save with his life. The heretic then had the same doom as the traitor. Do you understand what he's saying here? In 1359, you weren't allowed to deny God and his existence, or you weren't allowed to deny the supremacy of the church. And if you did, you could be killed as a heretic. And because of that same mindset is the that made that law. So what they were saying was, you have to be loyal to the king and the church, and the king is obviously the head of the church, so you have to be loyal. So, and if you don't, you'll die. We'll kill you. And that same law is being used to kill an Irishman in an English court. So you see where he's coming at? See where he's coming from? So today a man, so up to date, today a man may forswear God and his heavenly kingdom without fear or penalty. So you may deny God exists. You may deny the church today. All earlier statutes haven't gone the way of Nero's edicts against the Christians, but that constitutional phantom, the king, can still dig up from the dungeons and torture chambers of the Dark Ages a law that takes a man's life and limb for an exercise of conscience. Isn't that fucking... Do you understand what he's saying? Today, a man may say, I don't believe in God, and no punishment will befall him. But that constitutional phantom, the king, can still dig up from the dungeons and torture chambers of the Dark Ages a law that takes a man's life for an exercise of conscience. If true religion rests on love, it is equally true that loyalty rests on love. The law that I am charged under has no parentage in love, and claims the allegiance of today on the ignorance and blindness of the past. I am being tried in truth not by my peers of the live present, but by the fears of the dead past. Not by the civilization of the 20th century, but by the brutality of the 14th. Not even by a statute framed in the language of the land that tries me, but emitted in the language of an enemy land. So antiquated is the law that must be sought today to slay an Irishman, whose offence is that he puts Ireland first. Loyalty is a sentiment, not a law. It rests on love, not on restraint. The government of Ireland, by England, rests on restraint, not on law. And since it demands no love, it can evoke no loyalty. Do you hear what he's saying? First of all, he's saying, I'm not English, you can't try me for treason, and you had to go back 600 years to find a law to do it. And loyalty to your country is not a law, it's a sentiment. So he's ripping them apart. Now, they ended up, I'm not. Spoiler alert, they hung him. So it didn't work. But they even had to go in, there was like a comma in the, sorry, not a comma, there was a will they call it a comma? But there was a part of the original law written in 1394. No, what it was 1356, whatever it was. And they found it, and what it said was that you can be tried for you don't have to be in England or English to be tried for treason against England, right? Which up until then, you have to be. And this is to tie this into what we're doing, what's going on today. Julian Assange is being held in Belmarsh Prison in London on crimes against a part of it is they're looking to extradite him to America from Sweden under trumped up charges to America because he's a and the laws are like laws of treachery against America. Julian Assange is Australian. You can't be tried for laws against a country that you're not of. It's like you doing something against Japan, and then Japan calling you a traitor. You're not Japanese, how can you be a traitor? This is what he's saying, right? But my point is, this is still going on today. So, I've skipped over loads, going to another little paragraph here. And what is the fundamental character of an Englishman's liberty? That he shall be tried by his peers. With all respect, I assert this court is to me, an Irishman, charged with this offence, a foreign court. This jury is for me, an Irishman, not a jury of my peers, to try me on this vital issue. For it is patent to every man of conscience that I have a right, an indefeasible right, if tried at all under this statute of high treason, to be tried in Ireland before an Irish court and before an Irish jury. This court, this jury, the public opinion of this country, England, cannot but be prejudiced in varying degrees against me. Because of all in time of war, I did not land in England. I landed in Ireland. It was to Ireland I came, and to Ireland I wanted to come. The last place I desired to land was in England. And the English took him from Ireland and brought him to England to try him for treason. So, skip over another little bit. This charge of high treason involves a moral responsibility, as the very terms of the indictment against myself recite, inasmuch as I committed the acts I am charged with, to the evil example of others in like case. What was the evil example? That was a part of the charge being read out. The evil example of others, setting an evil example, basically, right? What was the evil example I set to others in the like case, and who were these others? The evil example charged is that I asserted the right of my own country, and the others I appealed to aid my endeavour were my own countrymen. The example was given not to Englishmen but to Irishmen, and the like case can never arise in England but only in Ireland. To Englishmen I set no evil example, for I made no appeal to them. I asked for no Englishman to help me. I asked for Irishmen to fight for their rights. The evil example was only to other Irishmen who might come after me, and in like case seek to do as I did. How then, since neither my example nor my appeal was addressed to Englishmen, can I rightfully be tried by them? Fair enough. So, skip over lots and lots and lots. You should read this. You can find this online quite easily. It is true that they based their actions, so they averred, on ears for the empire. And sorry, let me just... He's talking directly now about the guns thing, about getting the guns. On the ears of empire, that took in all the peoples of the empire, save only the Irish. That blessed word empire that bears so paradoxical resemblance to charity. So paradoxical, so the opposite of a charity. For if charity begins at home, empire begins in other men's homes, and both may cover a multitude of sins. I, for one, was determined that Ireland was much more to me than empire, and if charity begins at home, so must loyalty. Since arms were so necessary to make our organisation a reality, and to give the minds of Irishmen, menaced with the most outrageous threats, a sense of security, it was our bounden duty to get arms before all else. I decided with this in end to go to America with surely a better right to appeal to Irishmen there for help. And let's face it, you go to America to get the money because that's where the money is and was then. In an hour of great national trial, then those envoys of empire could assert for the weekend descents on Ireland or their appeals to Germany. So we're nearly done. Nearly done, nearly done. last little bit, literally, this is it, last paragraph. And this is the summation of everything. And I'll talk about it at the end. We have been told, we have been asked to hope that after this war, Ireland will get home rule. The war was World War I, of which Irishmen were fighting and dying in. As a reward for the lifeblood shed in a cause which whomever else its success may benefit, pardon me, can surely not benefit Ireland. And what will home rule be in return for what its vague promise has taken and still hopes to take away from Ireland? It is not necessarily to climb the painful stairs of Irish history, that treadmill of a nation whose labours are as vain for her own uplifting as a convict's exertions are for his redemption. To review the long list of British promises made only to be broken, of Irish hopes raised only to be dashed to the ground. Home rule, when it comes, if it does come, will find an Ireland drained of all that is vital to its very existence, unless it be that unquenchable hope we build on the graves of the dead. We are told that if Irishmen go by the thousand to die, not for Ireland, but for Flanders, for Belgium, for a patch of sand in the deserts of Mesopotamia, or a rocky trench on the heights of Gallipoli, they are winning self-government for Ireland. But if they dare lay down their lives on their native soil, if they dare to dream even that freedom can be won only at home by men resolved to fight for it, then they are traitors to their country. And their dream and their deaths are phases of a dishonourable fantasy. But history is not so recorded in other lands. In Ireland alone, in this 20th century, is loyalty held to be a crime. If loyalty be something less than love and more than law, then we have had enough of such loyalty for Ireland and Irishmen. If we are to be indicted as criminals, to be shot as murderers, to be imprisoned as convicts, because our offence is that we love Ireland more than we value our lives, then I do not know what virtue resides in any offer of self-government held out to brave men on such terms. Self-government is our right, a thing born in us at birth, a thing no more to be doled out to us or withheld from us by another people than the right to life itself, than the right to feel the sun or smell the flowers or to love our kind. It is only from the convict these things are withheld, for crime committed and proven, and Ireland, that has wronged no man, has injured no land, that has sought no domination over others. Ireland is being treated today among the nations of the world as if she were a convicted criminal. If it be treason to fight against such an unnatural fate as this, then I am proud to be a rebel, and I shall cling to my rebellion with the last drop of my blood. If there be no right of rebellion against the state of things that no savage tribe would endure without resistance, then I am sure that it is better for men to fight and die without right than to live in such a to live in such a state of right of this. So basically he's saying he's better to die on your feet than live on your knees, is what he's saying. Where all your rights have become only an accumulated wrong, where men must beg with bated breath for leave to subsist in their own land, to think their own thoughts, to sing their own songs, to gather the fruits of their own labours, and even while they beg, to see inexorably withdrawn from them, then surely it is braver, a saner and truer thing to be a rebel in act and in deed against such circumstances as these, than to tamely accept it as the natural lot of men. Roger Casement. And that's some speech. You should read the whole thing. So, a part of what he did, there was certain sympathy within this world's establishment, but a part of what did him in as well was the discovery of a thing called the Black Diaries, because Roger Casement was a gay man, and he kept diaries about his loves, and they shocked the establishment at the time. And it's a part, you know, it's like because gay people didn't exist but until recently, as we all know. It's a part of the hypocrisy that we've all we all know about. So the Black Diaries were circulated among the, and a lot of the people that were advocating for him sort of backed off a bit then. And then he lost his appeal and he was hung. And he converted to Catholicism on the 2nd of October. I don't know why, must admit. And his request was that he would be buried in Merlo Bay, here in the north, in County Antrim. Merlo Bay is beautiful. They didn't honour that. They basically covered his body in Pentonville. He was hung in Pentonville prison, and they covered his body with quicklime, and that was the end of that. Eventually, he was interned. His remains were returned to Ireland, and in 1965, I believe, his remains were interned in Glasnevin Cemetery, along with all the other heroes of the Easter Rising, and it's Irish Martyrs Graveyard in Glasnevin. If you've never been there, you should go. It's brilliant. I'd love to go back. I'm going to go back again soon. I had a great night. There's a fantastic bar down there called the Gravediggers, and I spent a fucking brilliant night in it with my brother and my sisters years ago. We ended up in a lock-in. God knows what time in the morning. It was fucking fabulous. And although he wanted to be, he wanted his remains buried at Merlo, in 1965, it was considered fucking definitely not happening because of Northern Ireland being the place that it was at the time, and they weren't going to allow a leader of the Irish Rebellion to be buried in the north. So that's why he didn't get that. But he has a grave, in his grave, his remains are in Glasnevin Cemetery, and you can go and you can see it, and he has a headstone there. But in the north here we have Casement Stadium up in Belfast, which is going to be redeveloped and turned into a big, fantastic, big, fancy new thing. So I'm sure he would be fairly happy about that. So there you go. A great man. A man whose journey went from one thing to almost the mirror opposite. And he came to understand what empire was, what it meant. And we could all do a bit of it if we could, if there was as much awareness about empire. Although the empire is gone, but the sins of the empire still live with us today, still exist. And this is, by understanding the past, we can shape the future. And the lessons that I personally would take from learning from the sins of empire, all empire, is that the crimes of the colonial past, of the empire's past, don't go away with the empire. And what we're doing today, I mean the West, in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and other countries as well, but those four off the top, Palestine, for example, off the top of my head. If this stopped tomorrow, hundreds of years it takes to fix the problems that have been caused. And that's my takeaway. So whenever you see the establishment committing these modern crimes, you need to understand, when they drop that bomb in Syria or Libya or wherever it may be, when they overthrow this government in Venezuela, Nicaragua, embargoes in Cuba, wherever, the price of that is going to be paid for decades and maybe hundreds of years. And that's my thing. That's what I take away from empire and from the cruelty of it. So there we go. I'm going to call it. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned something. I hope you appreciate a little bit more about Roger Casement, who he was, the great man that he was, the brave man that he was, a man who lived and died with his convictions and saw things that we couldn't possibly imagine. I've never read The Heart of Darkness. I'm going to go and read it now. That Joseph Conrad book. I've never read it, so I'm going to do that. Maybe you should too. And I wanted to recommend a book. I've got a graphic novel of Roger Casement's, about Roger Casement's life, and I forgot to bring it out. So I'll get to that. So listen, I'm going to call this. So there we go. Cheerio to Roger Casement. I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm going to turn the theme music up a bit. And we'll see you.